unfortunately.
Have you reflected on the rise of escorts and sex work? I think it's pretty fascinating to look at the psychology of the women who do it and the men who pay for it.
Yeah. Well, the women who do it usually, and I think it's probably less now, but there's a big history of childhood sexual abuse. And the reason why child abuse often then becomes monetized sex work is because when we are violated as a child, men or women, when something is violated from us, the only way your ego kind of makes sense of what happens to you is to minimize the importance and significance of what was stolen from you. So if I was abused sexually, if I then minimize the importance of sex and then take some control by monetizing it and saying, I'm now in control of my body, I'm either going to be hyper promiscuous or I'm going to monetize it, what it does is minimizes the significance of sex, and therefore I don't have to deal with the trauma I experienced. I now see sex as just an activity, and therefore if I was abused, it's not that serious. And so the psychology of them is usually coming from a broken place. And also the other thing that they struggle with is knowing what loyalty looks like in a relationship. They don't see it as an essential component because they've monetized sex and taken away the emotion element to it. So it becomes very difficult for them to be sexually loyal to their partner. It's almost like they see sex as a bit as an activity, and if they do it with somebody else, why would that bother you? They don't understand the process. So they end up being quite emotionally disconnected, very transactional with their partners, and the relationships become the relationships don't really last very long, unfortunately. They're void of emotions, and then it translates into their parenting as well.
What about the psychology of the men who pay for it?
The psychology of the man that actually goes towards it is usually he's somebody who's highly avoidant to begin with. There was some emotional disconnect in their parents, in their household. So when you want to court a beautiful woman in the real world, she requires some emotional connection first and foremost, or at least at some point. Now, if you find it hard to experience emotional connection and you have the money to go from pornography to escorts, you skip the emotional component and go straight to escorts. Escorts are porn addicts with money. Yeah, essentially, that is for them. And that low self-esteem, that's intense low self-esteem with the men that pay for escorts means that they don't believe they can access a woman of that caliber in real life. So let me at least pay for it, and therefore I don't have to experience rejection. The reason why emotional kind of disconnect is so important for the customer is a man that understands emotional intelligence and understands a woman's emotions wouldn't feel comfortable having sex with a woman he knows doesn't want to be there. A guy that normally has emotional intelligence will think, oh God, she's probably not enjoying this. And oh God, what trauma led her to get here? I don't want to have sex with somebody who doesn't want to have sex with me. But the man who skipped that emotional intelligence and just wants pleasure will not even think about the emotional trauma that got her to this position and just think, as long as she pleases me, I don't really care what it took to get her here. So that emotional disconnect in both of them, which is why they often fall in love with each other. Fall in love. Yeah, they often do end up together. And this is what I really hate about the narrative that they tell you that on these red pill podcasts, that men want virgins, men want good girls. The amount of successful men that fall in love with the escorts is because they allow him to not emotionally connect, but then still boost his ego, which is what his a dream come true. Whereas another woman requires that emotional connection before she can boost your ego. So the escort is just providing him with an ego boost with bearing in mind his emotional disabilities.
That's interesting. I noticed.
Is it? Can I ask? Is it big in America as well? Because it's huge where I live.
I haven't seen it. I mean, okay. Dubai, I think, is a very particular petri dish of like unique dating. Maybe Miami. I mean, in fact, I would almost be certain and with Miami.
London is getting there as well. It's getting it's just as rampant in London as well.
I'm noticing that you were in all of these locations. If you moved to Miami too, you would be the common denominator.
Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I bring the heat.
So I noticed when I was at uni and I was running a lot of nightclubs, and we would go. The only place that's open after 3 a.m. are the strip clubs, right? So we would go to the strip clubs. We'd know all of the girls because most of the girls would come out to one of our events on an evening time or whatever. And I noticed a lot of the girls were struggling. They would struggle to see men as like not genuine humans, but because their job required them to see men as resources to be extracted from. Like anyone that's ever been to a proper working class strip club, right? There's still, like girls in there. I'm not derogating the quality of the women. I'm talking about the kind of culture that comes through. They are fucking ruthless with how they take money from men.
Oh.
Like they're sitting on their lap. It's almost like a sales funnel. They understand the tricks that they can use to get a man to go for a dance, to get a man to stay with you, and so on and so forth. They entered the game, like the arena of play is, and if they've had too much to drink or they've done whatever, like probably shouldn't have gone to the strip club with your credit card if that's the case. But what happened on the other side of that, I noticed that a lot of the girls struggled to make an emotional connection with guys in their personal life. And I think that trying to separate out, this is someone that I'm supposed to have a genuine connection with, and this is someone that I'm supposed to have a transactional connection with. These two, it doesn't surprise me that you can't. These are going to bleed into each other, and the same has to be true with OnlyFans.
What happens with OnlyFans and strippers and sex workers in general, the pool of women that they're left with are men they don't respect. The reality is women respect men with masculinity, alpha, protectiveness, providing, etc. Now, when you go into sex work, you are left with, firstly, your customers are incredibly low self-esteem, incredibly naive to even believe that you're going to be loyal to them. And even if he's not your customer and he's your boyfriend, but he accepts your sex work, a part of you doesn't see him as powerful and a provider and doesn't see him as protective. Because if he was truly protective, he wouldn't be with you. If he was a man that genuinely was an alpha man and wanted a good woman, he wouldn't be with you. So the type of men they truly respect wouldn't be with them. So the only men they definitely can't fall in love with the guy that is giving them money. The closest thing they get to that is the pimp that's taking money from them, because at least then they kind of respect the fact that he's using her in a way. But to be manipulated by her, she feels more powerful than him and therefore can't respect him.
I wonder how many girls in strip clubs get into relationships with the bouncers and the door staff and the manager and stuff like that.
They end up they're just more likely to be with a man that they provide for than a one that provides for them. Because a man that provides for a stripper, there's a stupidity in that. Because this woman's transactional and yet you're giving her money, she can't respect you. But the man she has to pay for, whether he's like a bouncer that's on half her wage or he's just a personal trainer that she has to cover the rent for, she's more likely to fall in love with him because at least he's not stupid enough to financially invest in me. And a part of her unconsciously respects him more than the CEO that's going to buy you a house and a Range Rover because she's like, you're so stupid.
What have you come to reflect on about the psychology of slut shaming?
It's a way of validating poor decision making. So when we use the word you're slut shaming, what we're really saying is stop pointing out the flaws in my flawed behavior. Essentially, we need a society filled with guilt, shame, and regret. We need to be aware of these emotions. If we remove shame from our society and we call it fat shaming, slut shaming, essentially we find a way of normalizing what is abnormal behavior. And when we do that, we then become reckless. We need guilt, shame, and regret to help direct us into making proper decision-making, responsible decision-making, healthy decision-making. So whenever you hear the word that's fat shaming and that's slut shaming, if the word before it is negative, then the concept is broken.
We'll get back to talking to Sadia in 1 minute, but first I need to tell you about Element. Stop having coffee first thing in the morning. Your adenosine system that caffeine acts on isn't even active for the first 90 minutes of the day, but your adrenal system is, and salt acts on your adrenal system. Element contains a science-backed electrolyte ratio of sodium and potassium and magnesium that plays a critical role in reducing muscle cramps and fatigue whilst optimizing brain health and regulating your appetite. They are the exclusive hydration partner to Team USA weightlifting and relied on by tons of elite athletes around the world. Best of all, they have a no BS, no questions asked refund policy, so you can buy it and try it all, and if you do not like it for any reason, they will give you your money back and you don't even need to return the box. That's how confident they are that you love it. Head to the link in the description below or go to drinklmnt.com/modernwisdom to get a free sample pack of all 8 flavors with your first box. That's drinklmnt.com/modernwisdom.
Yeah.
Well, what would you say to the people who say, we've had a sexual revolution, Sadia. We don't need, girls can sleep with guys as much as they want to. Yeah. This is the new world. Get up to date now. It's 2023. Mm-hmm. Why should it be the case that is negative, shameful, guilt-riddled behavior?
Because you're the one saying that men are trash, and yet you're sleeping with them all day, every day. It's the women that sleep around the most that will say men are trash. The women in healthy relationships are not usually the ones saying that. So if this formula is working, why are you allowing trash to enter your vagina?
I had an idea. I had a theory about the game theory of slut shaming and the game theory of simp shaming as well. I want to teach you about.
Okay.
So, as far as I can see, more slut shaming comes from women than it does from men, right? Which might be on the surface surprising, but a bit more inspection, it makes sense.
Yeah.
The reason that more slut shaming comes from women than it does from men is because women are invested in other women not lowering the price of sex too low.
Yeah.
Men would happily have the price of sex be zero, right? If you are prepared to give blowjobs on the third date, but I want to wait until the fifth date, I'm also a girl, and I want to wait until the fifth date, it's in my interests to raise the price of sex, right? By shaming anybody who is more sexually promiscuous than I am.
Yeah.
So the problem that women are trying to combat is women who give sex without loyalty or resources, right? They want to raise the amount of loyalty and resources that other women use before they will give away sexual access. Now, what I realized, I think is true, men simp shame for the exact same reason in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So women are concerned about sex without resources. Men are concerned with resources without sex, right? So what a simp is fundamentally doing is saying, I will give away one of the few things that men are supposed to hold in the highest value, which is their ability to provide. And I will give you that in return for nothing.
Yeah.
Right? Or in return for some messages through a platform, or perhaps just financially dominated or sugar babying your way through college or traveling or whatever it is that you want to do. So I feel like the energy is very similar between these two, simp shaming and slut shaming. Both of them are trying to ensure that competitors of the same sex don't give away the most valuable resource, which they don't want to have the price of derogated too low. What do you think?
Absolutely. It's a form of intra-sexual selection, which in evolutionary psychology just simply means your competition within your sex. Now, the quickest and easiest way for women to kind of beat the competition is verbal aggression. And one of the things that slut shaming does is, firstly, of course, like you mentioned, it reduces the value of sex. So you're competing with people who give it for free. But in addition, by slut shaming, it's our way of unconsciously trying to put other men off that woman. Now, people only slut shame attractive women. You don't see there are many unattractive women who are also sleeping with lots and lots of men. But what happens with women, they only feel the need to shame when the person is a threat in any way, shape, or form. You will not see unattractive women get as many trolls as attractive women online. And you will not get unattractive women who sleep around get as many slut shaming comments as sexually
because they're
attractive.
seen as less of a threat.
They're not a threat. So essentially what intrasexual selection does is it makes women use verbal aggression against one another, but only if she's a threat. If she's not a form of threat, we actually turn it into praise, because then it works to actually be friends with women, because you can share breastfeeding, child rearing in evolutionary terms.
Alloparenting.
Yeah. But if she is any form of threat, she can potentially take your partner and take your resources. So whenever women are slut shaming and stuff, they usually focus on the women that they think that their partner would find attractive. So they might not slut shame, let's say for example it's an English match, they might not slut shame the workers in Thailand and stuff like that, but they would slut shame the local OnlyFans girls because it's more of a threat. So essentially we verbally attack those that we see as the biggest threat, and that will reduce the ability of us to secure resources from a man.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
And a sad thing as well, because I get a lot of hate from women, particularly from women, saying that I don't side with women enough. And I always just say, you have no idea what it's like to be around women. Like, well, maybe they do, but for me personally, I've only ever experienced negativity from women, especially in the workplace. So it's hard for me to really be like, women are amazing, women empowerment, women. When I know from my personal experience, we don't support each other at all.
Yeah, it's a ruthless sort of realization. I had Joyce Benenson on, I've had Christina Durante on, I've had Dr. Sarah Hill on, a lot of evolutionary psychology researchers who are looking at intrasexual competition, Candice Blake. And one of the things that Joyce looked at was the body language of female basketball teams. She found that male opponents showed more physical affection to each other than female compatriots. So men on opposite teams of a basketball court
still nicer to each other.
were more like physically affectionate than girls that were on the same team. And I think that there's a lot of stuff going on with hierarchy, how that works. It's the same reason why girls don't talk about their achievements academically if they know that other people are going to find out, because stepping outside of that hierarchy is something that's a little bit dangerous. And that's kind of ruthless, right? Like, it should be the case as a girl that if you succeed and do something well, that you should be able to like be proud about it, and you should be able to proclaim it, and other people should say, yeah, fuck, you did good, well done. And one of the disadvantages, men are ruthless to each other in very specific ways. But so are women.
Yeah, it was, and the thing is, with men, they would hunt and gather in tribes, so it makes sense for them to have camaraderie and be part of a group. For women, we wouldn't necessarily use each other to go hunt. We would only feel secure once we've secured the person that gives us resources. So that's why married women tend to be, who are happily in relationships, tend to be less verbally hostile to ones that are single. So single women together tend to be more verbally hostile to one another than when those that are happily spoken for, because they're no longer in that competition zone. So unfortunately, the reality of female and female empowerment, it only works if you're not threatened by each other. The moment there's a form of threat, they become very hostile and very aggressive. And so it's very difficult to have a platform where you're trying to just educate people about human nature as a woman, because you'll get very much a lot of hatred from other women. So it's not the easiest.
What are your qualifications?
I'm a psychologist. So what I did is I did a psychology degree, then I followed by master's, then I actually just went into teaching. So went into teaching, but then I did psychodynamic diploma. So,
okay. Is psychologist not like a protected term? Do you not need to have a doctorate or something for that?
You do if you're a research psychologist and if you're going to go into like clinical psychology.
Okay.
Yeah. So I haven't done a doctorate.